Hello and welcome to this edition of the Hockey Talk podcast. I'm Matthew Harding. This week's guest needs no introduction, but we'll give him one anyway. He played in 101 games with the Wheeling Nailers over 3 seasons from 2005 to 2008, spent parts of 7 seasons in the American Hockey League and 6 seasons in the National Hockey League, where he suited up with the best hockey player on the planet, Sidney Crosby. After a lengthy career in pro hockey, he retired and made a name for himself as an analyst for the Arizona Coyotes and a member of the Spittin' Chicklets podcast, which airs through Barstool Sports. Recently, the man affectionately known as Biz Nasty has led the charge to put together the PHPA ECHL COVID-19 Relief Fund so players can earn their last few paychecks that were lost due to the coronavirus pandemic. ECHL Week host Barry Schickling and I interview Paul Bissonnette.
How about we start with just saying, why did you think, or what was it about this whole player relief fund that made you think it was worth supporting?
Well, I mean, I think everyone, knows how much the league itself meant to me in spending the start of my professional career there, and, the different characters and personalities and amazing people that I got to play with and for. But when the idea all originated, it was unfortunate because I was on social media the day it was announced, and I believe it was one of the first leagues in North America to just cancel the season. And I was like, oh geez, like that's that was quick and unfortunate, but probably the right call given what's happened now. And then I come to find out that the players weren't going to get paid their last 3 weeks salary, and given I know the circumstances some of these organizations at that level go through, it wasn't an issue of like shaming anyone. It's just like some of them, they may not even be able to continue operations. So I figured, maybe, there's something our podcast could do to help get these players paid, because when I played with some of these guys, I know what they were making, and it's not a lot of money. And some of them have aspirations in order to get to the next level. Some of them have families that they need to, put a roof over their heads and feed. And I just figured, because it was the hockey community and it was something that popped out, that I would see if I can execute a plan in order to help get those guys paid their full salaries for the season.
You must that the time, those few years you spent in Wheeling must have been so wonderful. But is this just kind of a way of giving back, or is there some other thought process behind it other than what you just mentioned?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of aspects. I mean, like, I'm not going to lie, like, giving back feels good because I believe that the game in general has treated me incredibly. I mean, I was fortunate enough where I got to live out my dream and play in the NHL, and I want some of these guys to experience that as well. And I mean, just going back to my time in the ECHL, like, I could rifle off 10 stories off the top of my head that it really made me appreciate the NHL level. And it did so by, like, you weren't staying in the first class hotel, and you were doing things like you're like, oh, this is kind of weird that we're now on a booster bus because our bus broke down, and now they're going to take our bus once it gets fixed to the game. Or our player coach Terry Virtue, who we just had on the podcast, like, I'd never had a player coach before, and even for that time it was still a little odd. And even the next year we had a different player coach, and I got to play for Glenn Patrick, who is an incredible man, and also a guy who I played for where that was the last time I truly got to enjoy playing the game of hockey. I ended up going to the American Hockey League and, being a fourth liner and, being afraid of making mistakes because we had a very limited role. But, like I said, that league just, it meant so much to me in so many different ways that I'll never forget it. And I'm very, very happy that we're able to help out in a small way.
Have you gotten any feedback about the fund or about your part in trying to promote it and get people to understand what's going on and maybe have them contribute?
Yeah, I mean, we do it through our podcasts and our channels. Like, we're going to do our own small part. I think that the owners as well have I don't know if it's been confirmed, but I believe they're trying to commit to putting a fund together, as well as the PHPA. I think they have a contribution as well. So I think with the total of about $750,000 in lost salary of like the players, I'm hoping that maybe we'll able to recoup all of it. So everybody's putting their hands in and helping out, and it's really great to see because I think that the minor leagues are special for their own way. It helps grow the games in these cities where maybe hockey is not traditional, and it grows the game, which is going to be beneficial to all of us who love it. And I mean, look at the Alex Burrows and the 700 or 800 other guys who have clawed their way all the way up. And I would say there's a decent portion of those guys who weren't on NHL contracts. Because of the ECHL, they were able to continue to live out their dream and eventually play at the NHL level and make people happy there.
Talk really quick about some of your days in Wheeling. Obviously, this week you've had Terry Virtue on your Spittin' Chicklets podcast, but you also mentioned just a second ago that you played for Glenn Patrick, who you talked about as being a tremendous human being. Can you tell us a little bit of why you think so highly of Glenn Patrick, and also tell us a little bit about your time in the Wheel?
Glenn just loved the game, and he had a lot of passion, but he was in the same breath, he was such a player's coach where he really, really cared about the guys. He would have us over for dinner. Sometimes he would throw a big barbecue. He raised an incredible son in Curtis, who I got to play with as well. We ended up making a silly music video while we were there called MySpace Love Ship, because MySpace became popular, and it was about this. I mean, you'd have to watch it to believe it. It was so silly when we did it, but we were occupying our time away from the rink and really all bonding and enjoying each other's time as a team. I mentioned earlier that the apartments are paid for at the ECHL level. Well, when we were in Wheeling, we used to have 3 houses on Washington Avenue. Three of the 4 houses in a row right by Jesuit University were our houses, and I think there was 5 guys living in 2 of them and then 4 in another. So I got to live out college. I never went to college. So we actually threw a pink party one night, believe it or not. Now we got the Pink Whitney drink, but we threw a pink party where all the guys after the game, I think we won it. We invited our girlfriends, or if some guys had girls in town, and everyone wore pink. It was silly. We were young, we were dumb, we laughed a lot, and we had some good times.
Are those your fondest days, being with the guys in Wheeling and dressing up and having pink parties? Are those the days you're going to remember more as you look back on your hockey career, or is it the day you got the call to the NHL and dressing with Sidney Crosby and playing with big name NHL forwards like that? Or what are you going to take away from your playing days long after they're gone?
I would put them on the same weight personally. I know, of course, people talk about the NHL level. I mean, it's you've gotten to the dance, but when I talk on the podcast, I think those stories are more near and dear to my heart than anything. And it was cool playing in the NHL with Sidney Crosby and opening up our season at the Globe in Sweden, where Matt Sundin dropped the ceremonial face-off, and there was a 10-minute standing ovation, 5-10 minutes. I mean, I could have stood another 10 because it was worth ingesting that moment. But I carry them all the same way. And as I said, the group there in Wheeling that we had in that locker room just made the experience so enjoyable. And even like the one year, like we didn't win a ton of games, but we just had good people around. And I'll take there's some other stories I can't really say on this, but a lot of fun times.
The one thing that I always try and ask guys who make it from the ECHL to the American Hockey League and to the American Hockey League to the NHL is, tell me about the day you got the call from the ECHL to the American Hockey League. What was that day like for you? And then what was the day like you got the call from the American Hockey League to the National Hockey League?
Well, there's a lot of ups and downs between the AHL and East Coast League, but we had really good teams in Wilkes-Barre, so it was fun. And when you stepped in that locker room, it was ran like an NHL program. So I was not only thrilled to get called up, but I knew that being there was going to prepare me more for the next level if I was going to get there. So, Jeff Barrett, who's still around in Wilkes-Barre, they run their AHL organization like a fine-tuned vehicle, and it got me to the NHL. I credit all those guys. I had Michel Therrien as my first AHL coach, So he was very, very hard. Going back to the ECHL and why it was so enjoyable is because there wasn't as much pressure. So when mistakes were being made and, when games were being lost, it wasn't as gruesome as it was as you went up. And of course, we know at the NHL level, like it's like the world is crumbling when you lose a hockey game. But Therrien established that in right away. So he ended up getting called up to the NHL, and I had a few other coaches there. Dan Bilesma was a head coach there, Todd Richards. So as you can see, they had American Hockey League coaches who eventually ended up going on to the National Hockey League. So that's the type of development you were getting in Wilkes-Barre. Talking about the NHL, you know, I still had a lot to learn, I think, as a player when I played for the Penguins as a forward, but they did need a little bit more salt and pepper in the lineup because of the skill guys. So I stepped into a very good situation and to play with those great names in a year that they ended up going on to win the Stanley Cup. They just had to get rid of the dead weight, of course. It was cool. And, you know, I tell people about it all the time, what it was like playing with Crosby.
What was that like? What was that experience like dressing up with 87 there?
I mean, you guys probably seen the first 2 episodes of The Last Dance, and you're looking at, you know, you're maybe not looking at someone who's like willing to do anything to win, but he's maybe right there near Jordan, where everything when he walks in is focus, and it's remarkable. It's almost so selfless what he's given to the game, because I'm sure there's times where he has been frustrated, where he has to bite his tongue because, you know, he doesn't want to send the wrong message, and he had to keep a lot of things internally. And for what he's done, not only for the game of hockey, but just the, you know, for that organization in general. I mean, he's a GOAT.
Is there, kind of looking back at your career, is there one guy who you fought that you wished that you had a different result against, win or loss?
You know what? I'm just very, very happy I made it out alive and didn't get knocked out badly. I was the type of guy where I just kind of hung in there. I wasn't a big tough heavyweight. I would like to get, if I could have one particular fight back, it would be the Ryan Reaves fight at, is it called Scott's Trade Center in St. Louis?
Believe so, yeah.
Yeah. Well, he pretty much put me through the Earth's crust at center ice there after speed bagging me, and they were up, and he said no to fighting, so I had to take drastic measures. I gave him a kick in the back of the foot, and he was not happy, and I poked the bear, and he beat me up, and I get reminded of it on social media about once a week. So if I could just erase that from the internet and ever existing, that would be great.
Yeah, I can imagine. How has the transition gone from being a player to now calling games and explaining hockey to people in Arizona?
It's awesome. I try not to take it for granted, and I mentioned how, you know, trying to give back. It's just because I'm grateful for where it's brought me, and my 5-year career in Arizona in the NHL, getting to live out my dream, and again being around an incredible group of guys who, a lot of which I'm still very close with, and now getting to come back and do it in media is great. And I think that the organization as a whole is just improving in so many different areas. It's a fun time to be an Arizona Coyote. And I mean, we just got new ownership. I hope that we can come out of this and really keep growing what's going on down here in the desert. I mean, you saw Austin Matthews come out of here. We're in a good situation because looking at all these teams that have eventually had guys retire there's a strong correlation between them coaching their kids and then minor hockey and then the talent getting better and better. St. Louis, I would say, is a very, very good example of that, of a non-traditional market. Even Florida and Tampa are starting to get better, but I think Arizona's not far behind, and there's a lot of guys here willing to help out, so I think it'll continue to grow.
Final question for me. What advice, as somebody who's made it to the NHL, what advice do you have for those players in the ECHL and for those coming up through the ranks of the SPHL and into the ECHL and leagues like that? What advice do you have for those players about persevering and trying to see your dream through?
I always go back to the same thing, and it's just my own personal advice, was I didn't stay stubborn in my role or how it was all going to plan out, or not plan out, but roll out, because most guys coming out of junior were the best players on their team, and they put up all the points, and maybe they could neglect some areas of their game because they didn't have to focus on them. Well, you eventually get to a bottleneck where there's so much high-end talent where if you want to be a top 6 guy and you just aren't good enough to do so at a top level, some guys they refuse to change their role and their habits, where you gotta adapt, and sometimes you're going to be the 4th line guy, but you're going to get to play in the NHL, and you got to do things that maybe you don't want to do, like block shots, work on your wall work, and things that to the everyday viewer seem a little bit boring. But I've seen guys who just got so good at each little skill, and they ended up taking a back seat as far as their role concerned, and they ended up playing 15, 20-year careers. I mean, an example I always use is Brad Richardson. He was drafted as a goal scorer when I played junior. I think he had 41 goals his last year in Owen Sound, and he broke with the Colorado Avalanche and eventually won a Stanley Cup with the LA Kings. But he learned that playing 4th line and winning faceoffs and killing penalties was going to be his job, and I think he's doing all right for himself.
The fact is that, in today's ECHL, even though a lot of players are successful and they move up the ladder, that relatively speaking, or at least as a percentage, very few guys who are playing in the ECHL actually make it to the NHL. However, having said that, the fact that a lot of these guys are going through the same type of thing you went through when you're talking about the parties and the team and just the quote carefree attitude that is the ECHL. I don't think that has changed, even though the talent level is better and the games are they're just more competitive.
Yeah.
Is that maybe, you think maybe that's the heart of the ECHL, what this league is all about? It's not, yes, obviously it's developing players, but it's also giving guys who want to just keep playing and try that pro game out an opportunity to really add something to their lives, kind of like you did?
Yeah, and everyone has their own different experiences. I've seen guys who come out of college who are good enough to play in the ECHL, but maybe not the AHL. Some of which have even turned down getting called up because they're just like, no, I want to play and have fun down here and not take it as seriously. And they do so for 2-3 years out of college, and then they go on to live the rest of their life. So they're kind of hanging on to, like, I want to play hockey and have fun a little bit longer until I have to live the rest of my life not doing something that I completely love. But then, yeah, you have other guys who take it more seriously because they don't want to be in that league anymore. They want to get to the AHL level. And then you have some guys riding out their career. But to me, overall, it just seemed like it was more of a party, and it was taken a little bit less seriously. And I was okay for that point in time in my life too. So it's probably why I embraced it as the way I did.
Thank you so much for your time. I truly appreciate this.
Yes, thanks very much,
No problem,
Paul.
guys. Thanks for talking to me.
You can make a donation to the fund by visiting ECHL.com/COVID-19 Relief Fund. Our thanks to ECHL Commissioner Ryan Creelan and Manager of Social and Digital Content for the ECHL, Gabby Soley, for their help in setting up the interview. Our thanks to Paul Bissonnette for joining us, and thanks to you for listening. We'll have another episode of the Hockey Talk podcast very soon.